Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brendan Sullivan, and we're going to get started in about 15 minutes or so. So just hang on tight and speak to you all soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cargo Operations webinar. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes time. Speak to you all soon. Hello and welcome everyone to the IATA Cargo Operations webinar. We're going to begin in about 5 minutes. Hello everyone and welcome once again. We do see a number of people still logging in, so I'm going to give it another 2 minutes or so and then we're going to get started. Thank you. Hello and welcome once again to this IATA Air Cargo Operations webinar. Thank you very much everyone for joining us. I do have a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So all of your microphones have been muted, but we would really appreciate all of your interaction. So please submit your questions through the question box and send to everyone. We're going to go through some presentations, and then we're going to actually have a live panel with those presenters, and that's when we'll be able to answer those questions. The webinar today is actually being recorded, and it'll be made available afterwards, including all of the PowerPoint slides. Just a brief statement on the legal issues. So we're still under competition law compliance, and as a result, any questions or discussions that go into the areas that are listed here are prohibited. And that means that perhaps if there's a question that asks something like that, we won't be in a position to answer it, and we might have to cut something off if that's the case, but I highly doubt it. The agenda for today is we're going to go through some presentations from some experts. So we have Robert Fordry on capitalizing air cargo and managing through the crisis. From Suraj Nair on opportunities as we emerge from the crisis, and from Nadine Muklik on sustainable air cargo operations. Following that, we'll have the panel and Q&A with the experts. So please do send in all of your questions throughout the session, but we'll be answering them essentially at the end. So thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to join us. Last year, we had our first Air Cargo Operations Conference as part of the October events, and we really do hope that we can meet you all again face-to-face very soon. In the interim, of course, we have this webinar format to engage with some of our experts. So we have 3 excellent speakers today who are going to present, and then they join us for that interactive session. As you're all extremely aware, the industry's been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic situation, with massive capacity reductions and other operational challenges to contend with. The air cargo industry did what it does best. It pivoted and tackled the challenges head on. The situation has magnified some fundamental need for change in our industry, but it also presented some phenomenal opportunities. So today we're going to start to hear about those aspects from our different presenters. Our first presenter is Robert Fordry. He's the Executive Vice President in charge of cargo with Menzies Aviation. All the speaker bios, including Robert's, is available on the IATA website. And I'm sure many of you know Robert already and know that he needs very little introduction. So Robert is going to talk to us today about capitalizing on air cargo, managing through this crisis, and some of the opportunities that he sees as they begin to emerge in certain areas. So welcome, Robert, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Brendan, and hello, everybody. Brendan, I think first off, the picture that you were showing before had you without a beard, and I think one of the clear things that many of us have seen as a result of COVID-19 is a lot more beards on gentlemen than we've seen before. An unintended consequence of being stuck at home, I guess. Let me just reiterate an introduction from me. So Robert Fordry, as Brendan said, I'm Executive Vice President for Menzies Aviation's global cargo business. And if Brendan, you could take me to the first slide. I just wanted to give an indication on Menzies business and the size and scale that we are, which will give a little bit of understanding as to what we're looking at across the world. So from a Menzies perspective, we handle something in the region of 1.5 million tons of cargo a year across our global network. We operate at 36 different locations around the world, cargo locations around the world. but we are a aviation services provider. So we do ground handling, we do fueling, we provide lounges, we do a lot of other aviation related activity. And clearly, since the commencement of the COVID challenges, our ground handling business has suffered far greater than our cargo business. So our cargo business has actually been doing pretty well, not quite back to pre-COVID numbers, but it's certainly performing quite well, and certainly considerably better than ground handling businesses at the moment as well. And I don't think Menzies is immune to that, if you'll excuse the pun. Brendan, if we could go to the next slide. And this really just a very quick one, just to give an idea on the size and scale of the customer base that we have across our global network. And for any airlines listening in whose logo I don't have in here, I apologise, but I'm not sure there's many carriers that we don't interact with across different parts of our business throughout the world. So next slide, Brendan. So I think first off, just getting into a little bit of detail about COVID itself. We had a situation where COVID commenced, the lockdowns commenced. Many of our employees across the world went on to what we're calling furlough, which I'm sure everybody now knows. Basically, people at home are being supported by government subsidies to remain at home. And then we started to see a return for some cargo volumes. As everybody knows, passenger freighters started to materialize, and we started to see an increase in true freighter activity, and also passenger aircraft operating with a very limited passenger payload, which clearly gives an opportunity for a much greater cargo payload. So we started to see a return of some cargo volumes very, very soon after the lockdowns across the world were initiated. And that meant that we had to move our phasing, if you like, of our action plan for COVID, from immediately addressing the concerns for our employees and effectively sending them home, to bringing them back to work, and to doing so safely, and to ensure that we could deliver a service for our customers as well. So we put into place in the early stages this 5-point plan, which was largely based around communication to our team, so engaging with our employees who had spent time at home. We talked them through the operational procedures that would be required working in a warehouse or working on the ramp, which was different from previous times. We talked to them obviously about social distancing. We had the right PPE for them to work with. We were disinfecting the work environments. So there's a number of steps that we had to take to make the work environment safe for our employees, or as safe as we could possibly make it. So that's the first thing that we did when we talk about returning to a new normal, because there is no normal any longer. It's going to be very different, and has been very different. So Brendan, if we go to the next slide, the cargo handling facilities that we have around the world, and the graphic that you can see there, the picture, is a jigsaw puzzle. It's 4 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and we talk about our cargo business and our cargo warehouses around the world as being a jigsaw puzzle. So the carriers themselves are the pieces of our jigsaw puzzle, and our business works well and best when all of those jigsaw pieces fit together to give us the perfect puzzle. So we have airlines flight schedules that match each other. We have maximized the volume of cargo that's going through the facility. We have the right amount of labor against that, and that's what makes it successful cargo handling business. So the jigsaw pieces have to come together, and in many cases that is a carefully constructed business jigsaw carefully constructed over many years, because to find carriers whose flight schedules complement each other, which doesn't give us a huge peak of operation at particular times during the week, or indeed a huge trough of operation at certain times, which gives us a challenge with the labor. That takes some time to pull that all together and put it into place. There's very few handlers that have got perfect jigsaw puzzles of cargo handling businesses around the world, but it does happen in some locations, and that's utopia for us as a cargo handler. So in an ideal world, we have these jigsaw pieces, the carriers, and they fit together, and we have a great business. If we go to the next slide, what we're seeing now, what we saw during COVID, and what we're seeing post some of the lockdowns, and now with some of the lockdowns going back into place again, that carefully constructed jigsaw of operation has been completely pulled apart. So where we talk about the carriers being the jigsaw pieces and their schedules contributing to the size of their jigsaw piece, they're all now very different sizes. We are seeing missing pieces of the jigsaw, so some carriers that haven't come back to flying again, some carriers with a much bigger jigsaw piece because they're flying increased amounts of freighters or passenger freighters. So that again, that carefully constructed jigsaw puzzle needs to be constructed once more, and it's extremely difficult to do that right now because we don't know what size those pieces are going to be in the future. It's something that we're having to work with on a consistent basis. We're having to adjust. We're having to be flexible. We're having to support our customers as much as we can, but in many cases without an understanding of exactly what their volumes, what their schedules, what their plans are going to be from one week to the next. So it's an extremely challenging and ongoing situation at the moment for us to have the greatest cargo handling business and to be able to deliver solutions for our customers with so much continued uncertainty. If I take you to the next slide, this is just a bit more of detail, a bit more of an understanding of something that we've just experienced at Heathrow. I'm sure many of the participants will be aware of some of the challenges that we had at Heathrow. It was quite widely communicated. What happened for us is that we secured a very large scale airline contract at Heathrow that commenced on the 1st of September. And as a result of that, we had quite significant operational congestion. So to give more of an idea as to what happened, I'll take you through some of the timelines, some of the causes, some of the reasons that we went through, what we went through, and what we did to overcome that challenge. So pre-COVID, and this was around March of this year, we had completed our planning for this customer to join us. When we looked at our Heathrow cargo business, and again, if I refer back to the jigsaw pieces being the carriers themselves, we had a number of jigsaw pieces, so a number of customers, and the volumes that they were operating with at that particular time compared to the volumes that our new customer was going to bring to us, they maximized the facility, which from a cargo handling perspective, as a cargo handler, that's the best thing we can do, because that's the best business that we have when we're maximizing the capacity of the warehouse. So in March of this year, we looked at all the business that we had, the business we were going to get, and it was a very, very good fit into our facility. We then had COVID hit, and through June and July and into August, our existing customers, their volumes dropped dramatically overnight, literally disappeared overnight. And then they started to come back a little bit. And the new customer that was coming to join us, their volumes actually increased because they were one of the few carriers that continued flying nearly their entire schedule. So we then had an increase in the new customer tonnage versus a decrease in the existing customer tonnage. It was the same tonnage, it was the same volume as the planning that we did in March, so a good fit, things would have worked very, very well for us. We then get into a matter of 2 to 3 weeks prior to the new business coming to our facility on the 1st of September. And we started to get correspondence from our existing customers, giving us updates on their scheduling, and effectively giving us good news. So the first good news was so many of our existing customers explaining to us that we're going to start flying again. So good news. Not quite back to the schedules that we were before, but we're going to start flying again. So cargo will increase. Great news. Second piece of good news is that we're upgrading the aircraft that we're going to be operating into London because there is a cargo requirement. There's a cargo uplift requirement, and we can carry a lot more. So we're upgrading the aircraft so the payloads increase. And even better news than that for our cargo business was that the passengers clearly weren't flying, so the payload increased on those enhanced aircraft as well. The issue that we had is that you then look at the combined volume of our existing customers, the changes they've made to their flight schedule, the increase in the aircraft, the increase in the payload, and you put that together with the business that is coming from our new customer, who are also operating with passenger freighters and full freighters instead of the normal passenger flights. That put the capacity of our warehouse at about 30 or 40% over what it would normally be able to handle, and it also gave us quite significant peaks of operation as well. So again, if I revert back to the jigsaw puzzle analogy, we had an enormous peak of operation, particularly at the weekend, which meant the jigsaw pieces for our puzzle were too big. They were way too big with the changes that were made very shortly before the commencement, and that's what pushed us into the congestion issues, and that's what pushed us into operational performance challenges that we experienced for a couple of weeks. So if I take you to the next slide, this is something I think I've talked through in detail already here. So some of the things that we had to put into place were relocating customers to alternative handling locations because we weren't seeing a reduction in those volumes. So we had to find an outlet for that congestion. So we moved nearly 50% or just over 50% of our existing customer volumes. We found alternative locations, principally working with a partner at Heathrow, and this was to protect their business from the congestion that we were experiencing in our main terminal. Obviously, from a labour perspective, anybody that was on furlough, anybody that was working from home, all came back into the building, and we had a full-scale labour in place across all departments, and we had a senior management team as well that was overseeing the activity at Heathrow. So I spent a number of weeks there, and I had colleagues from a couple of other locations that, despite very challenging quarantine issues in coming into the UK, managed to get in and support our activity there. So a number of actions that we put into place to address that congestion, but principally it was about finding alternative locations for our existing customers. And Brendan, on to the next slide. So what did we learn from that? I think what we learned was it's extremely challenging at the moment for cargo handlers. It's challenging for everybody in the aviation sphere, but it's very challenging to kind of wrestle with cargo volumes that you don't know what they're going to look like from week to week and month to month. And there's a number of questions I've posed here as well, partly for myself, but partly for the panelists and for everybody else that's listening. So will cargo volumes currently handled on larger aircraft without passengers continue long term? My answer to that question is it depends what is long term. Personally, I don't see that reducing this year. I don't see that reducing into significant parts of next year. Eventually, I think it will, but I don't see that at the moment. So I think that's here to stay. So what we're going to be experiencing is significant peaks of cargo business in certain markets from certain carriers on certain aircraft. So we're going to have to be flexible in how we approach that, which is one of the actions that we've demonstrated here in the perfect handling jigsaw puzzle. That's the graphic there. And then if cargo volumes are greater from many customers, how do we manage that warehouse capacity on a temporary basis when you don't know how temporary it's going to be? So, you know, carriers could return to operations in 2 weeks' time. It could be in 2 years' time. And that, again, is a further challenge that we've got. And another question to pose, how do you manage your labor requirements when your volumes change significantly from potentially from 1 day or 1 week to the next? So the 4 actions that we've demonstrated here is flexibility, which I've just mentioned. That flexibility is across a number of different elements. So on the management team, on the way that we approach our cargo business. So we need to be flexible, and flexibility is about people doing the right thing and helping out in situations, but it's the business having a flexible approach to cargo as well. So, you know, do we need to invest, and how quickly can we invest in some markets that support short-term volumes? A second piece there is then employee engagement. I think that's one of the biggest learnings that we've taken over the last few months. We must be much better at engaging our teams, making them aware of the challenges that we've got, being very open, very transparent with our employees, and seeking their support during difficult times as well. I think for us as an organization, we've been pretty good in engaging with our employees and making them aware of things that are happening. But I think there's still more to do, and that is definitely something that we're taking forward into the future, that we need to be a little bit better at as well. Transparency with our customers. We were very honest, we were very open, we were very clear with all of our customers of the challenges that we experienced at Heathrow. We explained it will take us a little while to fix that, but we did, and we've recently had some very positive feedback as well from customers as to the way we handled that. But again, we would much rather be open and honest and transparent than try and hide anything. And the final piece, the word planning is written there 3 times, and that's because I genuinely believe it's the most important element. And planning is not about just long-term planning. It's having the ability to use that flexibility and adjust your planning. Even if you do planning in the morning, you may need to adjust it in the afternoon because there'll be a change in schedule. So having an eye on what you're doing and how you're planning it, and ensuring that your team is across all of the planning that you're doing, is fundamental to success at the moment, and in the near future, as we all try and traverse our way through the challenges that COVID brings us. Brendan, I'm conscious I've probably skipped a little bit over my time as well, so I'll draw my presentation to a close there, and I certainly look forward to any questions that may come on the panel in due course.
Thank you very much for that, Robert. Actually, you're just bang on time, so perfect planning, I guess, and delivery. Yeah, really great presentation. Thank you for that. So, you know, I guess it's one of these interesting things. Cargo performed as it does quite well, right? And cargo adapted quite well, which is possibly not always exactly what you want when you're in this pandemic type situation and you have huge people issues, right? And so I think you've highlighted this this importance of people, and I think that's people on all senses of the word, right? These are our staff, our employees, our friends, and our family that are affected, but also more in this case, or more specifically in this case, the need for those people to have significant cargo experience and skills in order to be able to adapt as you have. So thanks very much for that. Appreciate that, Robert.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move over to Suraj Nair. He's the founder and chief technical officer from Speed Cargo. His bio is also on the website, and so you guys can take a look at that. It's actually very interesting. But it also shows us what some of these opportunities can look like as we start to move forwards, and some of the real actual applications of those as well. So Suraj, over to you.
Thank you, Brendan, and thanks everybody for joining today. And Robert, it was a very insightful presentation. It validates a lot of things which we have read in the news. So I'm going to talk. My name is Suraj Nair. I'm the CTO of Speed Cargo Technologies. We are based out of Singapore, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to contribute to the to enhance cargo operations through AI and robotics technology we have developed over the past years and are currently entering the market with. So we are, in a nutshell, a very young deep tech startup from Singapore. Yeah. So I'll just jump to the slides directly, Brendan. So next slide. So I don't need to say too much about this slide. Everybody knows air cargo industry is a very important industry. It handles only 1% of volume of goods traded or transported over the world, but this 1% is already 35% by value because of the nature of goods which go through air cargo. It creates 68 million jobs. And interestingly, the revenue made by cargo airlines only in 2019 was around 102 billion US dollars, and the projections for 2021 are 138 billion dollars, and this is taking into account the COVID situation. So it is still a very promising industry. So of course, COVID has impacted cargo. It has also impacted the passenger sector, but as you see the graph from IATA, the cargo sector has been impacted slightly less as compared to the passenger sector. Yeah, and the recovery projections are there by IATA as well, and we can expect. I mean, the projections say that you can expect a capacity coming back over the next 1 or 2 years. We don't know how much time it will recover for it to get back to the previous normals, but it is definitely going in the right direction. So we are all positive. Yeah. So next slide, please. So air cargo, my first slide showed how attractive the industry is, but it is still a very struggling industry. So there is a 30-year innovation gap in this industry, and you can see this if you just compare the way you were flying 20 years ago as a passenger and now how your travel experience has enhanced. So the passenger sector has gone through a lot of innovation, a lot of experience enhancement for travel, and this has happened because of 3 things: digitization, optimization, and automation. Yeah. So you've seen the front end of passenger sector in terms of how your bookings are done, heavily digitized, but also the back end operations are heavily optimized and automated. I mean, if you look at the Changi Airport in Singapore, there is a very, very high level of automation, but this is completely missing in the air cargo industry or the air cargo sector. Although if you see both passengers and cargo fly on the same aircraft, but they are completely handled in different ways. Yeah, and the 3 pillars which made the passenger experience successful are really the 3 bottlenecks in the air cargo industry, and this is lack of digitization, lack of optimization, and lack of automation as compared to the passenger sector. So in terms of digitization, there is really a lot of inaccurate and incomplete data which flows through the entire ecosystem, which results in lack of optimization, which creates underutilized capacity. And of course, you have slow and inefficient handling, because handling is almost 100% manual worldwide. And all these 3 things result in revenue leakages. And this is easily validated through what the air cargo industry defines as capacity utilization. And you see roughly the capacity utilization by weight is 50% for the cargo planes, and in terms of volume, they reach around 60 to 70. But if you take the passenger counterpart, they can reach up to 91%. And why is this happening in the air cargo sector in terms of low occupancy or low capacity utilization? Because while pricing is done volumetrically, accurate and complete data is usually only available for weight. But when you're actually maximizing your capacity, which is a 3D volume, you need to work with 3D information. And this is where information is lacking, which results problems in optimization and automation. Next slide, please, Brendan. COVID has, of course, made it much worse. Capacity has more or less vanished. It is coming back, but not, we don't know how long it will take to get back to normal. So how can actually airlines optimize the capacity they have currently or what is still existing? And the big question is, can airlines and terminal operators continue to operate status quo when capacity actually returns? Yeah. So the answer is digitization, capacity optimization, and automation are key in reviving air cargo economics. Yeah. Next slide, please, Brendan. So what we have done at Speed Cargo is we have developed hardware and software solutions which can help you digitize, help you optimize, and help you automate. Yeah. And for this, we have developed 3 solutions: Cargo Eye, Cargo Mind, and Cargo Arm. These are modular solutions which can be used independently, but their real power is when they come together in the ecosystem where they help you digitize, optimize, and automate under one suite. Yeah. So Cargo Eye is a cargo digitization system which digitize your incoming cargo in real time. Cargo Mind uses this information to optimize your capacity in almost real time, and Cargo Arm helps you automate your handling processes using the information generated by Cargo Mind. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of these solutions, but I will keep my speech short because I have a couple of videos to show. Yeah. Next slide, Brendan. So Cargo Eye is a instant and accurate dimensioning system. And why I say instant, because it's extremely fast as compared to other systems which are currently used. We can scan cargo in less than 2 seconds. In fact, almost less than a second today, which allows you to basically, even during your peaks, digitize every single piece of cargo. So we can actually scan the cargo to extract the dimensions. We can look at the labels on the cargo and identify the labels. We can automatically get the weight from the weighing scale, and all these things we can push using APIs through your to the customer's backend system. So what, in a nutshell, we have done is we have taken a software-centric approach to cargo digitization rather than a hardware-centric. Although you see a lot of hardware in this system, it is a very software-driven approach wherein what we want to do is we want to enable you to easily deploy these systems throughout your network, so that you don't just automate one bay, but you can automate all your bays to get 100% digital visibility on your cargo. So I'll just play a video which will demonstrate the value proposition of Cargo Eye. Next slide, Brendan, please. Brendan. Yeah, so next slide, please. Yeah, so we have already tested the solutions at multiple locations at very large cargo terminal operation sites, very large forwarders, and a very large ground handler. So it's technology which is rather new, but it's already verified by large industry players. Yeah. So what do we do with this digital information? Yeah. For this, we have our second solution, which helps use digitally scanned information and help you optimize their capacity. Next slide, please, Brendan. Next slide, please, Brendan. Yeah, so this is the CargoMind solution. It's a real-time capacity optimization engine. And what it can do is it can plan your cargo capacity in 3D in real time. With real time, I mean, we can actually plan a complete flight, say 10 to 20 ULDs in a few milliseconds. Yeah. Which means we can keep on planning real time as cargo comes in. So we use deep tech algorithms to actually plan multiple ULDs simultaneously. And what we do is we are basically optimizing inside the ULD, yeah, and as well as outside the ULDs and how they should be placed in the aircraft. And what we have seen during our trials with some very large airlines is that we are able to free up 30%, up to 30% of capacity, which can be used for additional business. Yeah. So I'll just play a quick video of CargoMind, Brendan, if you may, and which will give you an idea of what the system can do.
CargoMind is a real-time capacity optimization engine. It uses deep tech algorithms to maximize the utilization of cargo capacity. CargoMind can plan multiple ULDs simultaneously while adhering to regulations and standards to ensure safety of cargo, ULDs, and the aircraft. The algorithms achieve volumetric optimization while assuring ULD stability, compliant segregation of dangerous goods, allotment of high priority cargo, and achieving a safe center of gravity for the ULD.
Next slide, please, Brendan. Thank you. Yeah, so now we have an optimized plan which CargoMind generates, and we need to make this happen on the ground in the operations. So we have two other solutions which actually take a computer generated cargo plan or a ULD configuration, and it helps the people on the ground. It helps the people on the ground build this plan using a device or a application we call Assemble. So it's a plugin to CargoMind which helps a cargo person on the ground or a cargo builder on the ground retrieve cargo in a systematic and efficient way and also build the cargo. Yeah. So Brendan, if you can go to the next slide and play the video. Brandon, next slide, please. Okay, so now I go to my last few slides, which talk about how you can actually do what manual builders do automatically or using an automated system. And this is our last solution, which is CargoArm, which can make the cargo buildup happen automatically using an industrial robot. Yeah, so it's an end-to-end automation for material handling in cargo. Yeah, we work with a gantry robot which can lift up to 3.6 tons of cargo in one go, while moving at 2 to 4 meters per second with an accuracy of 0.1 millimeters. Yeah. So, and we have developed advanced suite of grippers which can handle different types of cargo. Yeah. So I will just let the video do the talking, and this would be the last video of today's session. Thank you, Brendan. All right, thank you, Brendan. So I'll end with my last slide. Yeah, so what in a nutshell we are trying to achieve is through our solutions, CargoEye, CargoMine, CargoArm, is we are trying to bring value to existing cargo operations by increasing capacity and throughput, increasing the reliability of cargo handling, increasing work and health safety, re-engineered jobs, and of course, enhancing the security and mitigating risks which you see in cargo handling, especially in times of pandemics like COVID. Yeah. So that was my presentation. Thanks a lot. And if you can go to the last slide, Brendan, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, please happy to write to me to this email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Suraj. That's a really interesting presentation. I like the, well, I never like the comparison between air cargo and the passenger business, and especially not when it's a 30-year innovation gap. But if it can solve some of the problems that we've been seeing, and these are solutions that could actually be implemented now to drive that sort of ever sought after efficiency and capacity utilization, then it's extremely timely, really, given the constraints placed on the industry. So thank you once again for that. I look forward to having some questions and time with you afterwards. So the next presenter is going to be Nadine Mücklich from Fraunhofer. She's a project manager and researcher at the Institute for Material Flow and Logistics. Nadine's going to talk to us about sustainable air cargo operations, and a little bit of what that really means, and how this can be truly practiced today. So Nadine, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me today. As introduced, my name is Nadine Mücklich. I'm working for the Fraunhofer Institute for Material Flow and Logistics. And you can go to the next slide, please. Yes, I'm working in the Department for Aviation Logistics. And today I will talk about sustainability in air cargo operations and why it is critical to keep investing in innovation. Actually, the previous presentations already have all the ingredients to answer that question. I think it was really interesting to see how it is implemented and what kind of challenges we're facing. But at first, I wanted to introduce or give you a little bit of context on where I work. So next slide, please. Just a very short overview about the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, which is an organization containing of 72, I think now we're on 74 different research institutes and institutions that have different focus. And our focus for the IML is on material flow and logistics with our Department for Aviation Logistics based in Frankfurt, pretty close to the airport. When you go to the next slide, you can see a little bit of what we do. We develop, we evaluate, and we integrate innovation from the concept development to the finished product. It's including concept studies, roadmaps, demonstrative, a proof of concept, and of course the support through to market maturity and an evaluation of the function in the operation in the organization. Next slide, please. So what is our department actually doing? We're focusing on projects and processes in and around the airport and from and to the airport. This includes passenger handling, passenger transport, passenger handling, and baggage handling. But historically, we're more focused on the cargo, the loading, unloading, and ground handling part. This is actually where I come from, being grown up with a huge integrator here in Germany. And now I'm mostly focused on ground handling and sustainability related projects, which is also our topic for today. So if you go to the next slide. I think it's important to understand what we mean with sustainability. Sustainability is not only about cutting emissions, but it's about having a holistic approach to benefit the environment, economy, and the society of today and tomorrow. So the definition of a sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So develop what meets the needs of today, but also anticipating the challenges of tomorrow or be ready. Of course, we have some limitations that we are imposed to, but we will cover some of these aspects later. If you go to the next slide. Sustainability in the context of a pandemic. At the moment, I think we're more in seeing who's resilient to the situation and who can function during this pandemic and under which circumstances. So resilience in this context is the ability of a system to adjust its functioning prior to, during, and following changes and disturbances, so it can sustain required operation under both expected and unexpected conditions. I think we're here in definitely unexpected conditions that we had to fastly adapt to as far as possible. Going to one very basic statement on how to tackle this. It's a very general statement, which is not true for everybody, but in busy times, we have money, our operation is working, and all the puzzle pieces are functioning together, but we have limited and specialized resources to innovation creation. But maybe during this pandemic, we have less money, a lot of confusion, a lot of insecurities, but probably more capacity to develop and push innovation ideas. And I think a very important word here was employee engagement. So it's about building a strategy and investing in the right things at the right time. This is also present for the current situation, which is getting more and more insecure again. But also we need to think about what are our post-COVID-19 challenges and what can be or what might be our future demand and our future challenges. So here it is about using resources that are available, especially the unused resources. If you have people who are currently in some kind of part-time or forced part-time and use the resources that are currently unused to build this strategy and to anticipate future challenges, but also be resilient in the current situation to see what can be done, what innovative ideas may be beneficial at the moment already, and also anticipate future challenges. You can benefit from own research and development activities, of course, within an own organization, within the industry, but also I think an important point is for funding opportunities. I'm sitting within Europe, so I'm quite familiar with these European projects, and we're also not only active in industrial projects, but also in research projects on a European level. And there are funding opportunities also for individual companies and for individual organizations. For example, within this European Green Deal, there are a lot of opportunities that may be used to benefit as an individual organization, but also that benefits the industry as a whole. So I think cooperation and communication here is key. Next slide, please. An extract, of course, it is hard to generalize for the whole industry. The individual impact is dependent on the business model, on the location, and the interdependencies. Of course, integrators, for example, have a different situation at the moment than those that are using belly capacity only. We have low belly capacity at the moment, and probably it's getting lower again because the numbers are rising, at least here in Europe, pretty heavily. Limited capacity for full freighter aircraft and road feeder services. But one of the solutions that has been integrated with cargo and passenger cabins on main decks, which I think is a pretty good example for being resilient, for looking for solutions and integrating and using or exploit the measures or the circumstances we have to increase or to improve the situation. Still a lot of insecurities for all stakeholders exist. This is the reason why I really like this this puzzle picture with Jigsaw. It was really good to see that there is a lot of insecurities and a lot of things that must be reassembled in a way. And what we've experienced that in general, there's at the moment a low willingness to invest in innovation because everything is on hold and you don't know what will be next week, in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, or even in a year. So the planning is pretty difficult. But investments can help, or investments in innovation can help to recover and even benefit from the crisis in using these resources that are available to build up strategy and to involve people to increase effectiveness, to increase efficiency, and also increase safety in the operation. Next thing, please. I also think, like in the previous presentation, it has been said, digitalization, optimization, automation are key. This is why I've also named just 2 examples here, like one record the electronic airway bill. New technologies can support in a very good way, and the investment in new technology can support or even substitute manual processes, which does not only help us to avoid this human-human interaction now, but it can also benefit for the whole efficiency of the whole processes in the operation, whether it's in the terminal operation or in the warehouse operation, or it's on in ground operations around the apron. This can make us more resilient when facing crisis. The more we digitize, the more effective and efficient we digitize and automate our processes. It can help us to tackle a lot of these problems we've just heard. And I think key here is cooperation and communication, not only of the systems, but also of the organizations, of the stakeholders within the process. Next slide, please. Here's just a broad overview of some of the innovations at and around the airport. There are just a few projects that I will detail a little bit more, which we're at least somehow involved in and somehow integrated in, or that we highly support with our customers. Next slide, please. For artificial intelligence and related emerging technologies like autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things, blockchain, and augmented and virtual reality, which we are currently focusing quite a lot on, We see it as an enabler for technologies which lead to new processes and a new working environment. Here, of course, change management is an important thing, but also the use of the resources and new assembly of these resources to effectively tackle what we have today, but also what we have tomorrow. AI, so artificial intelligence, provides the means and opportunities to implement ideas that have been researched on for years. And I know there's a lot of opportunity, especially in air cargo, as we've seen the last 30 years. The development was quite limited. Next one, please. Green airport infrastructure and processes. So within our projects, we focus on 4 main areas, actually. It's on the landside connection, on the transport from and to the airport, on the cargo warehouse and the cargo terminal in here, on ground operations and airport operational processes, but also on number 4, the utilities and power supply. So what can be done in the operation to lower emission and increase efficiency? For example, with newer equipment, you have a tracking of not only where your equipment is, but also, for example, the fuel, if you need to refuel, but also about alternative fuels, like, for example, biofuels, not only for aircraft, but also for example, ground support equipment or else. Next slide, please. Development on the apron current research along the process chain. Of course, we have a look at the whole process chain and what are interdependencies within this chain. On the apron, we have a close look on resource management. So bringing together people, equipment, and information. So a new program or process also always have an impact on all 3: people, the equipment, and the information and data needs to ensure an efficient operation. Here we focus on automation, process, and equipment, irregularity management. Irregularity management also means in normal operations, for example, delays, and in the end, renew, improve, and avoid renew equipment and information system, improve operational processes, so efficiency and effectiveness, and avoid unnecessary pollution by optimizing processes and corporate culture. Next slide, please. EFTS, I go there very shortly. It was a study conducted, I think, 2.5 years ago, and it was on determining the potential of electronic autonomous vehicles on the apron. And here we see a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of challenges, for example, legal and regulatory framework and a high initial investment. I think it is in general about you're analyzing the own situation within the company, analyzing the environment you're operating in, the stakeholders and also the partners you're working with, and taking then the right decisions. Of course, high investment can be a no-go in this situation. Next one, please. For us also, augmented reality and air cargo handling and was a big issue, or is currently under development. For example, augmented reality for training people to build up ULDs, for build up containers and pallets, to teach people in serious gaming environments, a contour check, pallet weight and balance optimization, and mixed load prohibitions, for example. On the second, the contour check can also be done with augmented reality. Here you can see this Microsoft HoloLens that we're using at the moment to develop this environment, a database for contours, because I know from own experience that it can happen that you only see at the aircraft when you try to load the pallet, or when you try to load the pallet, that it doesn't fit because there has been some centimeters or some inches that are too high or too broad. The third thing that we were researching on is the ULD built up with augmented reality. For example, a 3D scan of pieces and software that supports it and can actually say what kind of dangerous goods is on the pallet, what kind of weight does the individual package has, are there any other things that need to be considered in loading or in building up the pallet for being ready to fly. The next one, please. Increased efficiency. I think really realistic is this concept of really knowing where our resources are, what they're currently doing, and how can we best plan for it. Intelligent air cargo container is one thing, monitors environmental influences, locates itself, and communicates with surrounding objects. And narrowband IoT equipment tracking, for example, for these Europallets, has its challenges still, but I think in the future there will be, for equipment tracking, or not in the future already, implementing equipment tracking via a GSM network, and no extra infrastructure is needed here. The next one, please. Okay, you can skip that one. This is about industrial apps, which is also on the same topic. And now quickly getting to my last slide, going green in air cargo operations. I think especially in the situation like we're facing today, it's about production and protection. This is a model I've adapted from James Reason. This is about how much can we invest at the moment to tackle the futures of today and the futures of tomorrow. It's about balancing sustainability management and financial management. Development of a sustainable strategy that can be already implemented today and considers what do we need tomorrow. For us, it's especially the increased efficiency of processes in managing people, equipment, and information, which makes it here very important for being sustainable, because with exactly knowing what kind of resources do I have and how can I manage them in the most effective and efficient way, and in the most safe way, of course, as well, helps us to tackle environmental, ecological, and social deficiencies. Yes, and actually that's it from my side here. If you have any questions to any of the slides or whatever, please do not hesitate to contact me via email or visit our website to see what else is interesting in our environment at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nadine. Really appreciate your presentation and how to look at different aspects of sustainability, like for example how to fund during a pandemic, which I think is pretty critical, as it tends to be a very easy sort of fallback for not doing something, and also a more, what I feel is a more complete view of sustainability. So we're now going to get into our panel session with all of our panelists. So I'd invite them all to come back onto camera, and I'll begin to start asking them lots and lots of questions, which are yours. Excellent. So the first question here is for Robert. Little bit slightly off topic, but very much on when it comes to planning and some of the questions you had around capacity and throughput and so on. We have this looming soon to be vaccine, and wanted to know, or they wanted to know how you would then prepare in terms of staff, in terms of management, in terms of capacity, in terms of your cold rooms. Obviously lots and lots of unknowns still, but you're a ground handler and you've been dealing with some unknowns for the last little while, so maybe you can give us some insights there.
That's a really, really good question. And if I knew the true 100% answer to that, I would probably be a very rich man and retired in about a year's time. I think it's probably the biggest question that the cargo handling community has right now. How do we handle vaccines? I think the issue that we've got is very similar to the COVID-19 challenges. We don't know. We don't know what the vaccines are going to look like. We don't know where it's going to be manufactured. We don't know if the countries we're operating in will be import or export. We don't know if it's going to need to come under temperature control, and if so, what temperature that will be. Is it 2 to 8? Is it 15 to 25? Is temperature not an issue? There's so many unknowns that it's extremely challenging to plan for that. having said that, having painted the negative picture, I think, to be fair to IATA, with the focus that you guys and others have had on pharmaceutical handling in recent years, the unintended consequence of that is gearing us up and getting us ready to handle vaccines. So, you know, lots of handlers around the world now have far better temperature control management and pharmaceutical handling solutions in place as a result of CIV certification or others. So that's put us all in a good place. And I think there are many more individuals across the cargo industry in recent years that have experience of handling medical goods or pharmaceutical materials than they ever did before. And then I think that the second piece is about managing those flows. And what we're wrestling with at the moment is, will the vaccines be required to be stored in a cargo warehouse under temperature control, and then will they be collected following the traditional method? But our thinking now is moving towards that's going to be unlikely. We suspect very much that there will be a requirement to handle an aircraft that brings in vaccines, but there'll be collections directly from the aircraft or deliveries directly to the aircraft, bypassing any kind of warehouses. So our focus is moving towards aircraft handling as opposed to physical cargo handling, because I think that will be a quicker solution. And from our perspective, and I know that other handlers have done something similar, I certainly have a cargo executive team that is part of a project team that we've pulled together that is overseeing our approach to the vaccine carriage. We have a number of individuals that will be nominated as key contacts for our airline customers and forwarding customers, so that we have a coordinated approach across our network as well. I wonder if that's perhaps a long and rambling answer to a very difficult question, Brendan, but hopefully that's nailed a couple of points.
No, that's very important. Thanks for the answer. I understand that we don't have the answer yet, and clearly talking and collaborating is going to be the way to get us there. But I did want to hear some of your views, and it's interesting to hear them. It actually brought me to one of these other questions here. So Suraj, so CargoMind actually collects a lot of data, right? And could some of that data then be used in the creation of forecasts and possibly then create some better planning? I know that we're in a period of massive flux here, but still, is the principle there that we could, through some of this data analysis, then get to better predictive models on forecasting and planning?
That is absolutely right, Brendan. And it's not just CargoMind, but it's a combination of CargoMind and CargoEye. In fact, CargoEye itself creates a lot of data which can be used for forecasting. We collect structured data, we collect unstructured data, and this can be actually used. For example, one of the biggest problems we see in the industry is inaccurate dimensions. Now, this is not just creating problems to optimize your capacity, but airlines are losing revenue. So from industry experts, I have inferred that in Singapore, this happens around 10%. 10% of the time, the freight forwarders underdeclare cargo. But in places like Vietnam and India, it's 70 to 80% of underdeclaration. So you can use dimension data and other data to actually create predictive models. So not only to forecast, but also to price the customers better. Yeah. So definitely, yes, you can use for forecasting, but you can also use it for really early or near-term decision making.
Great, thank you very much. Question for Nadine. So one of the things that we hear quite a lot when we do, in particular, e-commerce surveys or other where we hear from the customer voice, is that clearly sustainability is right at the forefront of people's minds. Do you see in some of the projects that you're working on that this is beginning to translate into or beginning to come into also some of the more traditional areas of air cargo?
Yes, definitely. There are initiatives actually going on and projects that are being funded in not only within Europe, but my experience is within Europe, that tackle exactly these things. Logistics at the airport, the cargo warehouses, and it is not only in specific areas where the sustainability character will be implemented or is in. I think there is quite a focus on. I was afraid in the beginning of this pandemic that people tend to say, okay, it's now only of somehow surviving. Yes, it is, but not only. So there's still this sustainability character within a lot of decisions that are taken, and it's just important to keep track on that.
Great, thank you very much. I've got a question here for Robert. What is your approach on demand planning and forecasting in these times when the airlines themselves do not have a defined schedule, or possibly that schedule shifts quite rapidly? Obviously, as a handler, you need to balance your costs with any potential revenues. And so questions around what's your approach at the moment towards demand planning and forecasting?
I think these are about the toughest questions that we would experience at the moment, Brendan, because that's one that I don't think anybody in the world has got the perfect answer to. What's our response to demand planning? I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, we need to be flexible. And using the word flexible is very easy, but actually it's very difficult to materialize solutions. It's about ensuring that we've got our teams on side with us, supporting what we're trying to do. Them being flexible, so many of them have worked with sort of rigid rostering for many years, and we found that people are a lot more flexible. They're willing to work different hours as business demands that, and that's been really fortunate for us that we've got such a great workforce that are able to do that for us. We have challenges over capacity utilization as well. So demand planning is not just about labor, it's about space. So in many locations, what we put into place is contingency solutions, taking our learning from Heathrow in recent weeks. We're securing additional warehouse space, in some cases in off-airport locations. But that gives us an outlet when we have capacity challenges. I think that's the two major things that we're doing at the moment. It's engaging with our teams and making sure that they're able to be as flexible and supportive to us as possible and work hours different to what they would normally do. And then having capacity solutions that we can turn on and off as easily as we can. That's not a simple process, but ultimately in some locations it's been very necessary.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, I know I was wondering to myself if you had any, I guess, new approaches to your traditional planning processes that you would have normally involving you and the airlines. Perhaps you mentioned, your plan in the morning might change by the afternoon. Are you having significantly more frequent touch bases with your operational teams and your executive teams, or are you deploying kinds of solutions to help you try and get through some of that?
So I think that the very last slide I showed was, and the point I was making was about planning and planning and planning. So absolutely, we have far more frequent discussions with both our operational teams and our executive teams. The executive team on the cargo side, we have a global team, and we were previously conference calling once a month, just to kind of check in and share best practice. We're moving that to weekly, so that we understand what is going across the network. What may happen in Australia may not have happened in the UK, but it may come, and what happens in the US may not necessarily happen in South Africa, but it may come as well. So we're exchanging best practice across that cargo executive team, but more at the sort of closer level to the cargo. We're engaging really frequently with our duty managers, we're using data to analyze the flows that we've got, and that's again a big learning out of Heathrow, analyzing the flows that we have from cargo throughput, and that's not just the actual volume, it's the product mix, it's the type of cargo, it's whether it's loose or whether it's unitized. We're taking a much closer look at that, because that really has a material impact on capacity utilization as well. So again, going back to the sort of summaries that I made, engagement with customers, engagement with staff, engagement with our management teams, there's so much more talking that is being done now than ever before, to get a real understanding of what's happening on the floor.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Robert. So here's a question that I'm actually going to ask to both Nadine and to Suraj. So given the air cargo industry is still largely dependent on antiquated legacy systems, how do you see solutions such as the ones that you've described, initiatives and projects and other software or hardware solutions, overcome some of the short-sightedness of the supply chain businesses who are, in some cases, possibly still very reluctant to digitalize or move in directions such as greener or other sustainable initiatives? So we go to Nadine first, and then afterwards I'll ask the same question to Suraj.
Mm-hmm.
Nadine.
I think it's a really good question, a really difficult question to answer, because of course there might be some short sights, but it's about the cost that will arise if we're not investing now and if we're not digitalizing now the industry. I think Suraj and also we are working on pretty good solutions in these areas, like open source platforms for the silicon economy, interconnecting stakeholders and so on. This can benefit the individual organization and the industry as a whole. And short-sighted is not time for being short-sighted here, especially when you think about we are in a pandemic. We weren't even able to anticipate what we're experiencing today, but we can anticipate at least a little bit what challenges we will tackle tomorrow. And I think what Suraj and also we're currently developing is a good way for interconnecting and for communicating more within the industry.
Yeah, so Brendan, maybe I'll answer your question in terms of a real life experience which me and my team has had over the last few years interacting with the community. So it's really not mainly a problem of the technology or the challenges of integration, but more of change management. Yeah? And it's not just the responsibility of the customer or the cargo folks, but it's also the onus is also on the solution provider. So what we see is that it's sometimes very easy to make the value proposition of your solution visible to the higher management, but the operations people don't see it, and sometimes it's vice versa. So it's important to work with everybody and build or make the value proposition. I mean, there has to be something for everybody in this whole thing. Yeah. So if there is a value proposition for the senior management in terms of revenues, but the people on the ground should also see the value of using it. Should not create more work for them. It should make life easy for them. And the technology has to be communicated in the right way to different stakeholders within the same company. And that's the only way to make change management a little bit easier. It's not solving the problem, but a little bit easier. And because I mean, we are working with some very big freight forwarders, like one of the top 5, and we see that they are working with legacy systems for 30 years, and it is not easy for them to change. Yeah, and it does not mean that they don't want to change, but they are also taking the effort to write plugins to onboard newer generation APIs. So it is basically a mix of how, for example, startups like us can work with bigger players. So there's a lot for both parties to learn in this thing.
Yes,
Great, thanks very much.
Sorry, just one thing.
Nadine.
I think this is especially what also Robert said. It's about employee involvement, employee engagement. This is super important for placing innovation. And I can not more agree to Suraj to say, okay, we need to communicate this on these different levels to make this a success story. And close-minded it's maybe not true, but you need to make it somehow tangible for the people to really see all these benefits that can come through. And then if you engage the people, if you involve the people, if you communicate not only what you intend to do, but also why you intend to do a certain thing, this can make life so much easier, and they do and can much more than you expect the people to do. Also, the normal grant operations personnel. This is, for example, where I started. So I think people involvement and explaining why you do a certain thing is crucial here.
Great, thank you. And one thing I wanted to maybe make clear is that you're both involved in projects which are quite real, quite tangible, and quite in the process of being implemented, or in some cases implemented in the industry. So there are absolutely, I understand there is still throughout the industry, maybe even large amounts of people who are lagging behind in certain technologies, but there are also others who are on the forefront and implementing, as is proven by some of the projects and initiatives that you guys talked about. Okay, we have quite a lot of questions and only a couple more minutes left. So let's move on to this question, specifically around how we see these things being implemented. So Robert, you talked about all the different challenges that you're seeing, all the different struggles. They're very much what I would call core brass tacks, cargo operational challenges to be dealt with. And then we have some really interesting technologies and projects and solutions, and we've described why these things are so important. So I'm going to ask this question actually to all of you, and then maybe try and get you to summarize then at the end your kind of views here. How do you see these kinds of things being implemented so that we can move forward? So Robert, how would you see these kinds of improvements being implemented? And do you see that they possibly address some of the challenges that you see in terms of your need for flexibility, your need for additional engagement, and so on? And I'll ask the same question about how you see these things being implemented to Suraj and then Nadine, and then I'll do a little wrap up.
So absolutely, we see, I think everything that my colleagues on this panel have discussed, we see as a benefit. I think if we had all of that in place and operating effectively, we would be in a much more capable position to handle volumes that are tracking significantly up or significantly down. When you have much more automation in place, it's much easier to do that piece of work. Obviously, the automation is expensive in terms of outlay initially, but I think it's fair to say prior to COVID, as an organization, we were looking at technology solutions across the world, whether that be software or hardware, whether that be supporting our teams or looking at automated solutions that will supplement what they do in the warehouses. And Suraj, let me be clear, I'll take a dozen cargo arms from you next week, but we can talk about that one separately. But absolutely, the initiatives we see as beneficial and necessary to help us through the situation at the moment. Obviously, they can't go into place tomorrow, and the challenge, I guess, is making investment available for any organisation at the moment, and investing in the future. What does the future look like? But at the same time, do we genuinely feel as though there won't be a cargo business in the future? Absolutely not. Aircraft will still operate. There will still be a necessity to get cargo from A to B far quicker than the shipping community can do so today. And if we can do that more cost effectively, quicker and easier and safer and more secure by using automation and using technology, then it's something that we have to do. And as an organization, Menzies has certainly evaluated that. I think we've stated in recent announcements to the city, as we're a listed company, that we are looking to grow our cargo business and we're looking to invest in our cargo business. And that's not about just acquiring businesses to grow in terms of scale, it's investing in what we've got as well. And that covers facilities and equipment and of course people.
Great.
Thank you very much, Suraj.
Yeah. So again, Brendan, I'll just talk from recent experience. Let me just keep it to the COVID time. So in COVID times, we have starting from February, I mean, we are a startup which launched during the COVID time. So not initially we thought, oh, okay, this is the worst period, but I mean, things are not that bad. So we've seen three types of customers, or I would not call them customers, but three types of companies which have, as soon as COVID has hit them, stopped all their innovation or all their investments. Then we have companies who, I mean, these are real experience I've had. We have companies who stopped it for 2 months and then they came back to status quo in terms of talking to us and seeing how they can. And then we have the third ones who have just increased their spending on innovation. So you have all these three. So what we have learned from this is that, especially like what Robert said, everybody wants in innovation. That is, that's not the problem, but the capex and opex issue is a big issue, and it has always been there even before COVID. Yeah. So as a startup, we have realized that we also need to be innovative and flexible in terms of what kind of pricing models we offer our solutions with, because most of the robotics and all these technologies are still in the past. Everything is capex based. So basically onboarding and using this thing becomes quite easy, and a lot of people do adopt technology and it ends up being a white elephant. So in terms of discovering the customer needs and providing the solutions in the right financial model, especially for example, Robert, for Cargo Arm, it is a heavy investment, but it also has a lot of value proposition. So we are exploring how can we offer this solution so that it makes sense for both parties, the customer and also the supplier. So this is key, I think, especially because of COVID going forward, where the customer has to be given the option in terms of pricing to be flexible.
Great, thanks. Nadine?
Yes, so in short, only two things to say about that. Of course, on the one side, innovation and digitalization is always dependent or must always be seen with a sense of proportion. So we need to have a business case. We need to see where are these individuals are, or what kind of challenges do these individuals are facing. This is what I said in the presentation. Everybody's in a different situation, has a different interdependencies, and so on. And the second thing I think is most important is we can only do this together in the industry and not as an individual. So digitization doesn't benefit, or doesn't benefit much from digitization if it's only our individual company in air cargo. So it must be within the whole industry that we go a step forward. So we can only do it via initiatives, via working groups, and in working together and collaborating to make this possible and to really benefit from increased efficiency and increased effectiveness of measures that we have in our individual companies. So I think, of course, we must make business models for individual companies, but season or build a context for it, build a context within the industry and also within the region they are operating in. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we are officially out of time. And so I want to thank very much our three expert speakers today. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Suraj. Thank you, Nadine. Also, thank you to everyone who joined us. Really appreciate all of the questions. I know we didn't get to every one of them. There are a few which are directed at individuals, and what we'll do is we'll forward them to those people and they can possibly help respond directly. In other cases, we may respond directly to you. I think you will find a lot of the information in the slides and material that we'll be presenting immediately following. So once the recording and everything is available, they'll be on the IATA website. that's just about it from us. I thought this was an excellent session. And we heard a lot about the different challenges, but also some of these different opportunities, which I think is key for air cargo right now and for air cargo moving forwards, especially, for example, the cost of not investing now for the future of the industry. And that's investing in all senses. So investing our time and our effort, as well as some of our hard-earned funds. Really appreciate everyone's expert advice and everyone's time. We'll let you go here. Don't forget that we have a number of additional webinars coming up. So we've got one more tomorrow on lithium batteries. We've also got the e-commerce webinar coming up on Thursday, as well as some others in the future. You find all the resources there, and that is where you'll also find the recording once it's posted. So with that, I leave you with a great big thanks and hope to see and talk to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank
you
you
all.
Bye-bye.